How has your week been this week? How are you doing right now? You doing well right now? Okay. Weeks are different, aren't they? They change, they shift around. It looks like some weeks are better than others, and so, it looks like some weeks aren't so good, but I have an idea they're all good. So I would like to share with you a message called a transformation that heals us. And if you'll go to one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, it's Romans chapter 8. This is a spiritual chapter about the Spirit of God. And Romans chapter 8 has a couple very familiar verses. I know you know these verses, but what I'm going to ask you to do tonight are two things. Keep your heart open. You already got your heart open. Now I'm going to ask you to make your imagination run wild. Imagine some things. Imagine that the verses that we're about to read are true, and that God that stands behind those verses is even wilder than your wildest imagination. Okay? Because you're just going to have to say, can God really do this? Is this possible? God can make this happen. He can transform us, and as He changes us to the image of Jesus, He heals us along the way. And as we receive healing, now we're candidates to give that healing to other people. We become ministers of God. So Romans 8, 28 and 29. We know that all things work together for good, for those who love God and them that are called according to His purpose. Now, we already stated that you're here because you love God. And you're here because of the purpose of God being fulfilled and lived out in your life. So hold on to this. God says that He can do this, that all things can work out for you. Even things that don't look like they're going to work out for you, God can take them and put them together with everything else and make it work out for you. Then He says, for whom He did foreknow, He also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He might be the firstborn among many brothers. Do you know God has predestined something for each and every one of us? He has predestined that you and I would be conformed into the image of Jesus. That's not a small thing. You have to use your imagination just to even get a glimmer and a glimpse of what God is doing in you right now and what His intended purpose is, and that He's already completed His intended purpose. God has predestined you. That is, He has already mapped out your destiny before you live it out. Isn't that just... You think about who God is and that He's just written the end, and all you're doing is you're living out your life to the end. So God is so awesome that He can make all things work together for us because we love Him, we're called by His purpose, and then we're predestined. Who could ever stop God's will? If God says you're predestined to be like Jesus, who in the world, who in heaven, who on earth, who under the earth, in the sea, who can stop that from happening? Absolutely nobody, because God has preordained it and predestined it. Now, I'd like to thank Roger, because this week, Roger shared with us in our meeting an illustration. And the illustration was a man who was a writer of movies. And this man, as he would begin to create scenes and write different scenes for a movie, he had 3x5 cards, and each 3x5 card had its own unique separate scene. Each card was a scene. And then in his room, he had 150 or plus 3x5 cards that he was constantly rearranging as he was working out all the details of his next movie. And somebody asked him, well, how do you bring it all together? How do you bring this movie to the point, to the conclusion where this drama unfolds. And he says it's easy. I write the last scene first. And so as he writes the last scene, he rearranges all the 3x5 card scenes, and all of those lead to a predestined conclusion. That's what God has done in your life. God has already written the end of your life, and it's good. Jeremiah 29:11 says, I know the thoughts that I think of you, says the Lord, thoughts of good, never of evil, to give you a good outcome, to give you an expectation, to give you a good ending. And the ending is already written. It says in Psalm 139, God, you knew me before I was made. You formed and fashioned me in the womb, and you established me. See, God has written the end of your life. And then in Isaiah 46:10, let's go there. Isaiah 46:10. It's too good just for me to quote. Isaiah 46:10, verses 9 and 10, God says, remember the former things of old? I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me. Now listen to this. Declaring the end from the beginning. From the ancient times, I've declared what is not yet done. And my counsel will stand, and I will do my good pleasure. Are those blow your socks off 2 verses? God just says, I'm God, and I can do it. There's no one like me. I know, take a look at the former things. Remember those things? I told you they were going to happen, and they happened. I declare the end of everything at the very beginning. From ancient time, those things that are done today. That's an awesome God. That's a tremendous God. That's beyond my imagination God. God is so good that he writes the good ending first. You are predestined to be the character and the likeness of Jesus himself. So what happens from the end scene and all these other scenes? What happens? A sovereign God who has a sovereign will says that I can make even the worst 3x5 card scenes in your life, I can make those scenes work for your good. You watch me. That's pretty bold. Look, God's a bold God. He says, I don't care what stuff you're going through today. I'm going to turn it for good. I don't care what hurt and pain. Well, he does care. But he says, I don't care that the hurt and pain is there. What I care about is that I'm going to take your hurt and pain and your woundedness, and I'm going to turn it into a victory for you. It may not look, that 3x5 card all by itself may not look very pretty. But you take the 3x5 cards of the scenes of your life and let God bring them into order. You just stay in faith. You remember to keep his word. You remember to trust him. Because when he says it is written, he also says it is finished. That's our God. I recall a story. It was a young man who was up for a partnership in his firm. It's Salt Lake City, Utah, this happened. And this young man, the night before his big day, his big presentation, he took his clothes and he laid them all out, and he just wanted to be ready for the big day. And as he prepped and he got his work together, his presentation together, he got it all ready so nothing could stop him the next day. He forgot something, though. He forgot to set his alarm. And when he woke up, he realized he was already over a half hour late. So he rushes around, gets cleaned up, gets out of the house, gets in the car, jumps on the freeway, and the freeway is backed up. I mean, it's going nowhere. Must be some accident. And so he takes the next off-ramp, and he's going to take a shortcut through town. He hits every single red light that there is to hit. He said, all right, I know what I'll do. I'm going to take the country road. And as he goes to take the country road, he's ready to go up this embankment, and down come the arms of the train railroad crossing. And there's 100+ cars that go by, and he's waiting there, furious. As the armed guards go up, and as he crosses, he notices above this little hill in the road that there's a rock and an object in the road, and so he just swerves over a little bit to avoid the rock, and his right tire goes off the shoulder, and he hears this pop. And he's got a flat tire. He can't believe it. He takes his jacket off, throws it in the front seat, goes to take care of his tire, and he notices that in his tire, he ran over a spike, a railroad spike. He just can't believe it. He says, is there anything else that could go wrong this morning? I am already late, and this is the biggest day of my life. My career hinges on me being there 15 minutes ago. He's so furious, he rips the spike out of the tire, and he goes to throw it, and he realizes, wow, that's the heaviest spike I have ever seen in my life. And he looks at the spike, and it's all corroded, and it goes to the back of his car, and he starts scraping off, and he notices it's bright and yellow. And then he scrapes the backside, and it says Promontory Point. And it's got a date on it. And he realizes this is one of the commemorative spikes when the railroad, the Santa Fe, when they met east and west. This was one of the commemorative spikes. He said, this spike is worth a fortune, not just in gold, but the commemorative value, the historical value. He said, I'm holding in my hand a virtual fortune. He says, you know, if I didn't forget to set my alarm, if the freeway wasn't backed up, if I didn't hit every red light, if the train wasn't crossing, if I didn't swerve off the road and avoid this rock, this would never have happened. He said, this is my lucky day. This is one of the best days of my life. You know, we can say when we're going through stuff that we will stay in faith, because when God says it's written that I'll make it good for you, you can take that to the bank. Stay in faith. Your final scene has been shot, and all you're doing is you're just working up to the best of the best in your life. And God's the one who sees you through all those best other scenes. So I'd like to share with you just a couple illustrations and example. Jesus had his final scene written in advance. Hebrews said that for the joy set before him, that he would endure the cross, despising the shame. You see, he already knew the joy was set before him. So he would endure the 3x5 cart of shame. He despised the shame of the cross, but he would certainly accept it as God's will, because he knew God can make all things, even his crucifixion, work together for the good for people who love God and are called according to his purpose. You see, he saw the end. His end was written. He knew that there would be a day when the tomb would be empty. He knew there would be a day, an end scene, where he would ascend into heaven. He saw that there would be a day where he would open up the gates of heaven for you and me. He saw the end of his life. He saw the final scene. If you would turn to Isaiah chapter 61, I'm going to share with you some things that have been happening to us, but we know there's a final scene. In Isaiah 61, 6 and 7, you shall be named the priests of the Lord. Men shall call you ministers of our God. That sounds to me like that we're fulfilling the purpose of God in our life. That men will call you ministers of God. And that you are now the priest of the Lord. You should be called the priest of the Lord. Men shall call you ministers of God. You shall eat the riches of the Gentiles. That is, even those who are not saved will bless you. and turn out to be part of the good that God is working out in your life. Even those who don't know God. You love God, you're called according to his purpose, but that doesn't stop God from using anybody to bless you and advance you and causing every scene in your life to fit together to work for good. Now, get a load of this one. This is so personal to Kim and I. These two verses are verses that I've been standing on. God has given me these two verses. Listen to the next one. For your shame, or instead of your shame, you shall have double. Would everybody say double? Double. And instead of confusion, you shall rejoice in your portion. Therefore, in your land you shall possess the double, and everlasting joy shall be unto you. Take this verse, take these verses for you. Let God say to you, instead of shame or guilt or blame, you're going to have double. Instead of confusion, you're going to rejoice in your portion. And therefore, in the land, God is going to give you double in the land. Everlasting joy will be yours. You're going to rejoice in your portion. I like that song, His Eye is on the Sparrow. When Jesus is my portion. He's saying right here, God is your portion. When Jesus is my portion, his eye is on the sparrow, but he watches over me. Why? Because Jesus is our portion. Don't let anything else be your portion in life. I like what Andrew said. Just give it all. Let's give it all. We only have one life. Jesus gave his one life. Let's give it all. What would we lose if we just give it all? I'll tell you, we would lose if we just didn't give it all. Jesus is our portion. If his eye is on a falling sparrow, it says he watches. He watches with both eyes. And I'll tell you, God doesn't blink in your life. There's no time where God doesn't see you. There's no time where God is not watching over you. There is no instance in your life where you think it's good or bad. He knows the end, and he is watching over you to see to it you get to your end. That's the greatness of God that only takes only our imagination can even get close to what that means, that God is that good. Then it says, instead of shame, you shall have double. I received that. You receive it too. For 5.5 years, Kim has been giving care first to her mother and then to her father for the last almost 4 years. And he died a week ago, just a week and a few days ago. And you know, it wasn't easy for her to give care. It wasn't easy for her to take care of Dad. Dad was not an easy person to care for. And when he went to the hospital, she just took a breath and got a little rest. Then he went to a care home, and she was there every day, but she got a little rest. But when hospice said, take him home, and Dad said, don't let me die in a home. You know, there is a dignity that we must give people at the end of their life. We don't let our loved ones die alone. We don't let those who raised us suffer indignities. And he was having a difficult time breathing. It was a smoker's death. It was a, what's it called? COPD. And so there he was in this home, and the nurses said he's virtually suffocating. So hospice was called in. He went home. He was able to relax, be in peace. Hard enough to give care. I can't tell you how proud I am of my wife. For 5.5 years, you know, that takes an effort. But on top of that, she had a brother and a sister who tried to put the guilt and the shame and the blame on top of all of this. Accused her. of taking Dad home to die and to kill him. That's sick. That's sorry. That is just terrible. And then the brother showing up and physically accosting her and verbally abusing her. And a sister that went just along for the ride. I'll tell you, God says, instead of that shame, I'm going to reward you for double. You're going to rejoice in your portion. And in your land, you're going to possess the double. As we're settling all the affairs this week, a neighbor from across the street wanted to see the home, our home, that Kim's father was living in. She saw the home, and she says, I want to buy your home. We didn't list it. Nobody knew. Just a couple neighbors knew. And so we agreed on a price. And we're about to sign the deal. And you know, the deal's not quite double. The land is not quite double what it was when we bought it. And it's as though the Lord said, look around. And I did. I looked around. And I remember, wow, for caring for my mother and caring for Kim's father, there was a modest inheritance. When you add the value of the property, and when you add the two little inheritances, do you know what they come out to for us? Double. They come out double. In the land, you will possess the double. But it just doesn't stop there. God just makes this great big buffet, and he brings out a huge dessert, and he puts a cherry on top. Listen, it doesn't stop just by saying, in the land you'll possess the double. Everlasting joy will be your portion. There is nothing that Kim and I have ever gone through, any negative stuff, that we haven't come out on the other side with more joy than when we came in. You see, nobody can take away your joy, and only God can give it. Because he is joy, he is the portion, and he's got joy to give. We are so grateful that God has blessed us with this verse. I would say that the fulfillment of these verses and others is to the glory of God. The ending before the beginning, the working for good, that things are predestined to work out according to God's plan. Now, in closing, I want to share a scripture with you, and it's in the book of John. John chapter 12. This has to do with this church. This has to do with a church transforming, a church living in greater healing power. Now, our lives are being transformed from glory to glory, and God's healing us as we go and taking us to that great end chapter in our life, that scene that he has written and only he can write. But he does the same thing for churches. And so I'd like to refer to this church because we're not even 60 days old. And we have a couple testimonies that I'll share with you later. In just 60 days, there's a couple amazing testimonies. But here is one I want to share with you. In John 12, verses 20 and 21, says, there were certain Greeks among them that came to worship at the feast. Now, these Greeks, they found Philip, and they desired something. They asked him something. They said, sir, we would like to see Jesus. I like that. I like that a lot. Here are Greeks, Jews from outside the country. They've come a long way, and they've come to the Passover feast. Now, at the Passover feast, I mean, they could have been impressed with the great temple, Herod's temple. They could have been impressed with the shofar blowing to announce the Passover. They could have been impressed with the gold in the temple, the riches and the decor and everything on the outside, but they weren't. You know what they wanted? They want something on the inside. They said, what we really want is we want to see Jesus. I'll tell you the end of our church. The end of our church isn't how many people we can put in this building. It's not how much we can do, and it's not the events. All those can be important. The shofar is important. The temple is important. The decor, okay? All these things are important. A stage setting, that's important. But it's not what people are looking for. The sound and the music, all good, but that's not what people are really looking for. We can have the greatest stuff, and we should give our best to God. But I'll tell you, the end scene for this church is people will come here to see Jesus in you. They'll come here to see a transformed person who's healed and who already is living out their life like they're living out the destiny. They're going to look for people like you and me who know we have a destiny and who dare to live in that destiny and realize that even the troubles of life cannot shake us because all things work together for good, because God's love is in this place. We're called according to his purpose. Yes, we will serve him with all of our heart, but the whole purpose is that people are coming here and they're going to say, sirs, we want to see Jesus. And by the way, they will. They are. That's why we're here. That's why we're born. Again, people desperately in this hour, in 2015, there are so many hurting people in this world. They're going to come and they're going to say, I'm here because I want to see Jesus in you. I want to see a transformed you. Someone who looks a lot like Jesus. Someone who talks like him. Someone who prays like him. Someone who loves like him. Someone who has his peace. That's part of our ending. God has written our ending. And all we're going to do is we're going to take our 3x5 cards and we're going to walk out every scene right to the end. Would you pray with me? Lord, we stand in awe of an awesome God and all the things that you can do, but it's not that you can do them, it's that you will do them. And you have already declared it. The end is ours. And we claim each and every 3x5 card victory scene that we can trust you with every scene of our life. Lord, there is none like you. No one else beside you. We admit it, we acknowledge it, and we live like it. No one like Jesus.